Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. Love has a way of convincing you that the impossible is real. When I married Elise, I was certain she was my soulmate. I told myself we had something unshakable, something rare, different from all those couples who drift apart over time. We were stronger, I thought, more authentic. For years, I clung to that belief. I wasn't the type to fall in love recklessly. I'd always been guarded, deliberate about how much of myself I shared. But Elise, she changed that. Or so I believed. From the day we met, she drew me in effortlessly. Her bright, unrestrained laugh could light up a room, and she had this knack for turning even the dullest moments into something thrilling. She was spontaneous, vibrant, and when her eyes met mine, I felt like I was the only person who mattered. So, I gave her everything. She became the center of my universe. My dreams, my decisions, everything revolved around her. I made sacrifices without a second thought, big ones and small ones alike, just to see her smile. If she needed me, I dropped everything. If she wanted something, I found a way to make it happen. For a long time, I convinced myself she was doing the same for me. But looking back, the truth is painfully clear. I was never her priority. She just loved being mine. It didn't hit me all at once. That's the thing people don't get. Relationships don't always collapse in a blaze of drama. Sometimes they erode quietly, bit by bit, until you're left standing in the wreckage of something you thought was eternal. The signs were there from the start, if I'd been willing to see them. I'd spend hours planning special evenings, dinners under the stars, weekend getaways to the coast, little tokens of affection to show her how much she meant to me. She'd flash that dazzling smile and say, "That's nice, Daniel." But she never reciprocated. If something better came along, a night out with friends, a spontaneous invite to an event, she'd ditch our plans without hesitation. I told myself it was just who she was. She wasn't heartless, I reasoned. She wasn't unkind. She still kissed me good morning, still whispered, "I love you" before bed. But love isn't just words, it's effort. And her effort was nowhere to be found. The moment that shattered everything wasn't loud or explosive. It was just a quiet, ordinary night that laid bare the truth. We were sitting at the kitchen table in our Seattle apartment, eating takeout after a grueling day. I've been swamped at work. Endless meetings, tight deadlines, running on fumes and black coffee. But I was buzzing with excitement. A project I'd poured months into was finally paying off. A deal that could mean a major promotion and a hefty bonus. I couldn't wait to tell Elise, to see her light up with pride. I was wrong to expect that. She sat across from me, barely touching her food, her eyes locked on her phone. I started talking anyway, hoping she'd catch on. "So, if this contract gets signed, it's a game changer. We're talking high five figures, maybe more. It's the biggest thing I've ever pulled off." Silence. I glanced at her. Her face glowed faintly from the screen, her fingers swiping and tapping, lost in her own world. "Elise," I tried again, louder this time. She made a vague hum, then let out a soft chuckle. Not at me, but at whatever was amusing her online. She typed something, smiling to herself, completely disconnected from me. I stopped mid-sentence. The room went still. 10 seconds passed. 20. 30. She didn't notice. Finally, she looked up. "Oh, sorry, what were you saying?" Her tone was casual, distracted. I exhaled slowly. "You didn't hear a word, did you?" She sighed, setting her phone down with an air of annoyance. "Daniel, I was just replying to a message. You always turn nothing into something." I stared at her, disbelief tightening my chest. "Nothing." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "Why does everything have to revolve around you?" A dry laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. "That's rich, Elise. For years, everything's revolved around you." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go again." I pressed on, my voice steady but edged with years of pent-up frustration. "When was the last time you put any effort into us? When was the last time you made me feel like I mattered?" She shook her head, exasperated. "Daniel, not everything has to be so heavy. You act like I owe you proof every day." I waited, searching her face for something, anything to contradict what I already knew. She just shrugged. "Look," she said, her voice cool and detached. You're just not my priority anymore." The words hung there, heavy and suffocating. I nodded once, pushing my chair back. "Okay," I said simply. No shouting, no argument, just acceptance. I carried my plate to the sink, rinsed it off, and headed upstairs. She didn't stop me, didn't call after me. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling, trying to recall the last time she'd made me feel valued. I couldn't, and that was enough. The next morning, I woke before the sun crept through the blinds. Elise slept soundly beside me, her breathing soft and even, as if the weight of the previous night hadn't touched her. She looked peaceful, unburdened, like she hadn't spent years nudging me to the fringes of her life. I lay there for a moment, the ceiling a blank canvas for my racing thoughts, the heaviness of it all pressing against my chest. Then I turned to look at her. This was the woman I'd once believed would be my forever, the one I'd poured everything into. She hadn't changed, not really. Maybe I was just finally seeing her for who she'd always been. I let out a quiet breath. No more waiting for her to wake up and realize what she had. No more hoping she'd fight for us. I was done. I slipped out of bed, dressed in silence, and grabbed my keys. It felt like any other morning, like I was heading to the office, like I'd be back by dinner. But I wouldn't. Instead of driving to work, I headed straight to a lawyer's office downtown. The words came out steady, though they felt strange on my tongue. I want a divorce. They were unfamiliar, yet somehow, right, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't known was there. I wasn't interested in fighting or pleading. I just wanted out. The lawyer walked me through it. Assets, the house, the accounts. "I'm not getting taken for a ride," I told him firmly. He nodded, and by the time I left, the process was in motion. There was no going back. When I got home that afternoon, the house was still. Elise was gone, probably sipping coffee with friends in some trendy Belltown cafe, laughing without a care, oblivious to the shift that was coming. I didn't rush. I walked to the bedroom, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and started packing. Shirts, books, a few keepsakes. Every piece of me I'd scattered across that house I took back. There was no anger in it, no tears, just a quiet resolve. By the time I zipped the last bag, the place already felt foreign, like I'd never truly belonged there. In the kitchen, I slid my wedding ring off my finger. It hit the counter with a faint, hollow clink that seemed to echo too loudly in the silence. I grabbed a pen and a scrap of paper from the drawer and wrote, "If I'm not your priority, you're no longer mine." I left it next to the ring, took one last look around, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind me. No slam, no hesitation. I was gone. That night, I checked into a hotel a few miles away. I expected a wave of guilt or sorrow to hit me, maybe even regret. Instead, there was only relief, a lightness I hadn't felt in years. But Elise? She unraveled. Hours later, my phone lit up with her name. Calls, texts, one after another. "Daniel, what the hell? You're leaving me? Are you out of your mind? You can't just walk away like this. I'll ruin you." I let them pile up, unanswered. 2 days later, the divorce papers landed in her hands. And that's when the storm really broke. She started with the victim card. Friends we'd shared, people I hadn't spoken to in ages, began texting me. "What happened, man?" my old buddy Ryan asked over the phone. "Elise says you blindsided her, that she had no clue you were unhappy." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Blindsided? She's rewriting history, Ryan. She told everyone I just up and left her." He paused. "Yeah, she's saying you abandoned her out of nowhere." That was Elise, spinning the truth into something she could sell. I didn't bother defending myself. I didn't need to. When the pity act didn't stick, she flipped to threats. Her messages turned venomous. "You think you're getting out of this unscathed? I'll make you pay, Daniel. You're not walking away with everything. I'll take it all." She tried. She demanded half my savings, the house we'd bought together, even my car. But she didn't know I'd already covered my bases. My lawyer had locked everything down before I'd even packed my bags. My accounts were safe, my assets untouchable. She had no leverage. If she wants the house, I told my lawyer, she'll have to buy me out. She couldn't. She never could. As the divorce dragged on, I started piecing my life back together. I found a small apartment in Capitol Hill, Nothing flashy, just a place that was mine, free of her shadow. For the first time in years, I did things for myself. I hit the gym again, took weekend trips to the mountains, reconnected with friends I'd let slip away while I'd been too busy chasing Elise's approval. Life felt lighter, less like a performance. And then, one quiet evening, I met Sophie. It wasn't some cinematic moment. No fireworks, no instant passion. Just a chance encounter at a coffee shop near Pike Place. We traded a few words about the rain, and somehow, it flowed into a real conversation. She was easy to talk to. No games, no guessing where I stood. We swapped numbers, and that was it. Simple. Real. I wasn't ready to dive into anything serious, and she didn't push. But over time, something grew, something steady, something I hadn't known with Elise. And that was just the beginning. Life without Elise didn't feel like the void I'd braced myself for. It was a slow unraveling of tension I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The apartment in Capitol Hill became my sanctuary, small, unassuming, but mine. I filled it with things that mattered to me. A battered guitar I hadn't played in years, books I'd always meant to read, a view of the city skyline that didn't come with memories of her. I started living again, not for someone else's approval, but for myself. The gym became a routine, hikes in the Cascades a weekend ritual, and old friends, ones I'd lost touch with while orbiting Elise, welcomed me back like no time had passed. I was finding my footing step by steady step. Meanwhile, Elise waged her war. The divorce proceedings stretched on, her threats growing sharper with every call from her lawyer. She wanted the house, the savings, anything she could claw away from me. But I'd been smart. My lawyer had everything airtight before I'd even walked out. She couldn't touch what I'd protected, and it drove her wild. She's not getting the house unless she buys me out, I told my lawyer, knowing full well she didn't have the means. Her bluster was loud, but it was hollow. Still, she fought, convinced she could wear me down. She didn't know I was already done letting her dictate my life. And then there was Sophie. We'd started meeting up after that coffee shop run-in. Casual at first, just grabbing drinks or walking along the waterfront. She was different from Elise in ways I couldn't ignore. There was no chase, no constant guessing game. When I talked, she listened, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to. When I suggested plans, she didn't flake for something shinier. She showed up, excited to be there. After a long day, she'd text just to check in, not because she needed something, but because she cared. It was small, simple stuff, but it hit me hard. For once, I wasn't someone's afterthought. I was a choice. We took it slow. I wasn't ready to leap into anything big, and Sophie got that. She didn't push, didn't demand more than I could give. But as weeks turned into months, it grew into something real. One night, after a late dinner at a hole-in-the-wall spot in Fremont, we ended up on my couch, a movie playing in the background neither of us was watching. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and it felt right, easy, like it didn't need to be forced. "You're quiet tonight," she said, glancing up at me with those steady hazel eyes. I smiled faintly, just thinking about how this feels normal. She laughed softly. "Normal's good, right?" I nodded. Better than good. Back in the divorce mess, Elise wasn't letting go without a fight. She'd moved past threats into full-on warfare, dragging mutual friends into the fray, painting me as the villain who'd shattered her world. "She's telling everyone you're heartless," Ryan told me one night over beers. "Says you walked out with no warning." I shrugged, sipping my drink. She can say what she wants. Truth doesn't need an audience. He studied me for a second, then grinned. "You're different, man. Lighter." He wasn't wrong. I was shedding the weight of Elise's indifference, piece by piece. The legal battle finally hit its peak. Months of back and forth culminated in a courtroom showdown I'd been dreading, but couldn't avoid. Elise sat across the room, her jaw tight, eyes burning with a mix of fury and desperation. She'd fought for everything. The house, half my savings, even furniture I didn't care about. But when the judge ruled, it was clear she'd lost. The house would be sold, my account stayed mine, and she walked away with far less than she demanded. I saw the panic flicker in her eyes as the gavel came down. She'd banked on breaking me. but she'd only broken herself. Stepping out of the courthouse, the air felt crisp, the weight of it all lifting off my shoulders. And there, leaning against a railing in the late afternoon sun, was Sophie. She looked up as I approached, her smile soft but sure. "Done?" she asked, pushing off the railing. "Done," I said, pulling her close. She kissed me, slow, grounding, and for a moment, the world was just us. Until it wasn't. "You son of a bitch." Elise's voice sliced through the quiet like a blade. I turned just as she stormed toward us, her face twisted with rage. Her eyes locked on Sophie, and before I could react, she lunged, grabbing Sophie's arm and yanking her back. "Get your hands off my husband, you!" she shrieked, her words dissolving into a snarl. A security guard was on her in seconds, hauling her back as she thrashed, wild and unhinged. Sophie stumbled, catching herself, shock flashing across her face. I stepped between them, shielding her, my voice calm but firm. "We're done, Elise. Let go." She froze, her chest heaving, something shifting in her glare. Not just anger, but fear. For the first time, she saw it. I wasn't hers anymore. The guard dragged her off, her shouts fading into the distance. Sophie brushed herself off, exhaling shakily. "You okay?" I asked, searching her face. She nodded, managing a small smile. "Yeah, she's something else." I pulled her into a hug, the chaos behind us already shrinking into nothing. That was the end of Elise's hold on me, and the start of something better. The courthouse clash marked the end of Elise's grip on my life, though she didn't fade quietly. For weeks after, her presence lingered like a stubborn shadow. Angry texts, late-night voicemails, pleas wrapped in venom. "You think you can just erase me, Daniel? You'll regret this." I didn't respond. Each message got deleted, each call ignored. She'd lost the war, and I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of a battlefield to keep fighting on. The house sold a month later. She couldn't buy me out, so we split the proceeds. Less for her than she'd hoped, more for me than she'd wanted. It was final, clean, and I felt no guilt. She'd made her choices. Now she was living with them. Life moved forward, and I let it. The apartment in Capitol Hill started feeling less like a stopgap and more like home. Sophie was a steady part of it. Not rushed, not forced, just natural. One weekend, she suggested we repaint the living room, and we spent a Saturday covered in paint splatters, laughing over my terrible brush skills. She moved in a few months later, not with some grand announcement, but with a quiet ease that fit us. Her books mingled with mine on the shelves, her coffee mug stacked beside my chipped ones. It was simple, unburdened by the tension I'd carried with Elise. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sophie was different in ways that still caught me off guard. She didn't just say she cared, she showed it. When I landed a big client at work, she didn't nod absently at my news. She planned a quiet celebration, just the two of us, with takeout and a bottle of wine. When I came home exhausted, she'd listen, really listen, not scroll through her phone. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was the small, steady ways she made me feel seen. With Elise, I'd been a passenger in my own life, always adjusting to her whims. With Sophie, I was a partner, and that changed everything. Word about Elise trickled back to me through the grapevine. She'd started dating again, but nothing stuck, flings that fizzled out in weeks. The friends she'd always chosen over me had drifted, caught up in their own lives, leaving her scrambling for the attention she'd once taken for granted. I heard she'd moved into a smaller place, a rental downtown, after the house sale. Part of me wondered if she'd ever reflect on what went wrong, but I didn't dwell on it. Her story wasn't mine anymore. One evening, as spring settled over Seattle, Sophie and I were sprawled on the couch, half watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, and I ignored it, probably Ryan wanting to grab a beer. It buzzed again, insistent. Sophie nudged me with her foot. "You gonna get that?" I groaned, reaching for it, expecting a work email or a spam call. Instead, Elise's name stared back at me. One new message. I hesitated, then opened it. "I was wrong, Daniel. I'm sorry. Can we talk? Please come back." The words hit me like a faint echo, raw, desperate, stripped of her usual venom. I read it twice, letting it sink in. Sophie glanced over, her expression neutral. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. I set the phone down, exhaling. "It's Elise. She wants me back." Sophie raised an eyebrow, waiting, no trace of jealousy or panic. "What do you think?" she said simply. I looked at her, curled up beside me, paint still flecked in her hair from last week's project, and the answer was clear. "I think she had her chance," I said, deleting the message. No reply, no second thoughts. "Just gone." Sophie smiled faintly, resting her head back on my shoulder. "Good choice." We went back to the documentary, the hum of the TV filling the room, and I felt a quiet certainty settle in. Elise's plea didn't stir regret or doubt. It just confirmed what I'd already known. I'd spent years chasing someone who'd never truly wanted me, and now I had someone who did. That was enough. Months rolled by, and Elise faded into the background, a footnote in a chapter I'd closed. Sophie and I built something solid. Not flashy, not perfect, but real. We took a trip to the Oregon coast one weekend, walking the cliffs at Cannon Beach, the wind whipping her hair into a mess she didn't bother fixing. She laughed at my terrible attempts to skip rocks, and I pulled her close, the ocean roaring below us. It wasn't a movie moment. It was better. It was ours. As for Elise, I stopped hearing much. Ryan mentioned she'd started a new job, something mid-level at a marketing firm, but the details were vague. Her life was hers now, and I didn't care enough to keep track. The divorce had stripped away the last threads tying us together, and I was free, not just from her, but from the version of myself I'd been with her. With Sophie, I wasn't proving anything. I was just living, and that, I realized, was what I'd been searching for all along. Time has a way of smoothing out the jagged edges of the past. By the time summer rolled into Seattle, Elise was little more than a distant memory, a name that popped up now and then, carried on the wind of idle gossip, but nothing that held weight. The divorce was long settled, the house sold, the accounts divided. She'd walked away with less than she'd fought for, and I'd walked away with my life back. I didn't gloat or linger on her downfall. She'd chosen her path, and I'd chosen mine. That was the end of it. Life with Sophie blossomed into something steady and warm. We'd settled into a rhythm. Not the chaotic, unsteady dance I'd known with Elise, but a quiet harmony that felt like home. Our apartment in Capitol Hill was a patchwork of us, her plants crowding the windowsills, my old records stacked beside a turntable she'd surprised me with one rainy afternoon. We cooked together most nights, bickering over spices or laughing when I inevitably burned something. It wasn't flawless, but it was real. And after years of chasing someone who didn't see me, real was everything. Sophie didn't just fill a void, she built something new with me. When I scored a promotion at work, she didn't just smile and nod. She dragged me to a dive bar to celebrate, toasting with cheap beer and teasing me about my tie. When I had a rough day, she'd sit with me, her hand resting on mine, listening without trying to fix it. She showed up, not out of duty, but because she wanted to. It was a kind of love I hadn't known before, one that didn't demand I bend myself into someone else's shape. With her, I was enough. Elise's life, from what I heard, took a different turn. Ryan bumped into her one day at a downtown cafe and filled me in over a late-night call. "She's dating some guy, but it's already on the rocks," he said, his voice crackling through the line. "She's still got that same energy, always chasing the next shiny thing." I nodded to myself, unsurprised. Her old crew, the one she dropped me for time and again, had scattered, married, moved, busy with lives she couldn't keep up with. The job she'd landed was steady but unremarkable, and the rental she lived in was a far cry from the house she clung to. I didn't feel sorry for her, didn't feel much at all. She'd built her world on sand, and now it was shifting beneath her. One night, as autumn painted the city in gold and red, I lay in bed, the room dim except for the glow of a streetlight slipping through the blinds. Sophie was beside me, her breathing slow and even, her arm draped across my chest. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a sharp vibration that cut through the stillness. I ignored it at first, half asleep, figuring it was nothing urgent. It buzzed again, insistent. With a groan, I reached for it, squinting at the screen. Elise's name stared back at me. One new message. I opened it, curiosity tugging at me. "I messed up, Daniel. I'm sorry. Please take me back." The words hung there, simple and raw, a ghost of the desperation I'd seen in her at the courthouse. I read them once, twice, letting them settle. Sophie stirred beside me, mumbling something incoherent before nestling closer. I glanced at her, peaceful, steady, the woman who'd chosen me when I'd stopped expecting anyone to. My thumb hovered over the screen, then pressed delete. No hesitation, no reply. I set the phone down and turned towards Sophie, pulling her in as sleep pulled me back under. Elise didn't deserve a second chance. Not from me. The months that followed were some of the best I'd known. Sophie and I took a trip to Vancouver, wandering the city's edges, sharing coffee in cramped cafes, and watching the skyline from Stanley Park. Back home, we hosted friends for game nights, the apartment loud with laughter and clinking glasses. Work leveled out, the promotion settling me into a groove I enjoyed. Life wasn't perfect. There were bills, arguments, the usual mess, but it was mine, ours, and it felt right. Elise faded entirely after that last message. No more texts. No more rumors filtering through mutual friends. Maybe she'd moved on. Maybe she hadn't. I didn't care enough to find out. She'd been a lesson, a long and painful one, about what I'd settle for and what I wouldn't. With Sophie, I didn't have to settle. She met me where I was, and I did the same for her. That balance, that mutual choice, was worth more than I'd ever known with Elise. One crisp evening, as winter loomed on the horizon, Sophie and I walked along the waterfront, the Puget Sound glinting under a fading sun. She slipped her hand into mine, her fingers cold but her grip firm. "You ever think about how things turn out?" she asked, her voice cutting through the wind. I glanced at her, the question catching me off guard. "Sometimes," I said. "What?" She shrugged, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Just glad they turn out like this." I stopped walking, pulling her close, the city humming around us. "Me too," I said, and I meant it. That was it. The happiness I'd earned, not by fighting for someone who didn't care, but by letting go and finding someone who did. Elise was the past, a shadow that no longer reached me. Sophie was the present, the future, and for the first time, I wasn't looking back. I was exactly where I belonged.